Hi, today's story takes us to Minneapolis.
My name is Nora Whitaker. I'm 32 years old, and I built my company from a folding table, a used laptop, and the kind of fear that either breaks you or makes you impossible to control. By the time this happened, I had 24 employees, city contracts, commercial clients across Minneapolis, and a best friend who had been beside me since the first invoice I ever sent. Then my father called and told me I had a choice, not a conversation, not advice, a choice. Fire my best friend and put family in his place, or they would tell everyone what I had really done in college. I remember going still at my desk, not because I was guilty, but because I knew instantly what they were doing. There was no scandal, no secret, no buried victim. Just a lie ugly enough to force obedience. An hour later, my mother repeated the same line in a softer voice, like that made it cleaner. Blood comes first. That friend of yours is replaceable. By noon, my father was on his way to my office. By 1, someone in my family had already had a company polo printed for a man I had not hired. By 2, I realized they weren't bluffing. They were staging a takeover in broad daylight, with my name, my company, and my future as the price of admission. And the worst part? They really thought I would fold. Before I tell you what he said, and what happened after I walked out, tell me, what time is it for you right now? And where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. I founded Skytrace Imaging, a commercial building inspection company that used drone mapping, thermal imaging, and structural documentation for property owners, insurance carriers, and construction teams. It was the least glamorous business in the world to people who didn't understand it, and that was exactly why I loved it. We solved expensive problems before they became disasters. We were good at it. My best friend Luke had been with me since year 1. He wasn't just some employee my family could casually push aside. He was my operations director, my emergency contact, the person who slept on an air mattress in my first office when a winter freeze burst a pipe and nearly destroyed our equipment. He knew the company, the clients, the budget, and every ugly stretch in my life I'd had to crawl through to get here. The family member they wanted me to install over him was my cousin Travis, a man who had failed upwards so many times that he'd mistaken rescue for talent. He couldn't keep a job for more than 6 months, blamed everyone else for every mistake, and treated networking like flirting with disaster until somebody else paid the bill. Years ago, I had made the mistake of recommending him for a warehouse logistics role at a friend's company. He showed up late, lied on reports, picked a fight with a supervisor, and then told our relatives I had sabotaged him because I always needed to feel superior. Since then, I'd kept him away from everything I built. Apparently, my parents had decided that Boundary offended them more than his behavior ever had. That night, they invited me to dinner and acted like it was a family meal instead of an ambush. My father poured wine like he was opening a negotiation. My mother smiled too much. Then he said Travis needed a real chance, and I had more than enough to give one. I told him no before he finished the sentence. His expression changed immediately. My mother reached for my hand and said I was being emotional. Then my father leaned back and repeated the sentence I had heard my entire life whenever they wanted compliance dressed up as morality. Blood is thicker than water. I asked why that logic only ever flowed in one direction. Why was I always the one expected to sacrifice, to absorb, to fix, to fund, to forgive? Why did family loyalty only seem sacred when they were taking something from me? My father's jaw tightened. My mother stopped pretending this was gentle. She said Luke had filled my head with arrogance and isolation, that I was choosing a friend over people who had loved me first. Then my father said the rest, flat and deliberate. If I didn't remove Luke from his role and bring Travis in, people might start hearing a different version of my college years. I actually laughed at first, because the accusation was so absurd I thought he was trying to shock me into silence, but he just stared at me. My mother stared too, and I realized they had rehearsed this. I left dinner without dessert, without my coat zipped, without another word. In the car, with my hands shaking around the steering wheel, I finally understood something I should have accepted years earlier. This wasn't pressure. This was extortion wearing my parents' faces. The next morning, I got to the office before sunrise. Our headquarters sat inside a renovated brick warehouse with black steel stairs, glass-walled meeting rooms, and a reception desk visible the second you entered. Usually, I loved arriving first. That morning, the place felt too open, too exposed, like an aquarium waiting for someone to tap the glass. Luke found me in the kitchen holding a coffee I hadn't touched. He took one look at my face and asked what happened. I told him enough to make him stop smiling, then promised I'd handle it before it reached the staff. He was quiet for a second, then said the exact thing I needed to hear. "Nora, they're not asking for help. They're testing whether fear still works on you." 2 hours later, my receptionist forwarded me a screenshot from a neighborhood gossip page that someone had sent around privately. It was a draft post, not yet public, but written as if it were. It claimed that years ago, when I was in college, I had targeted a younger student, used family money to silence the fallout, and then built a company with the same culture of protection. I read it 3 times before anger replaced shock. My family didn't even know enough about my actual college life to make the lie believable. I'd worked 3 part-time jobs, shared a basement apartment with 2 nursing students, and nearly dropped out twice because I couldn't afford a required software license. Family money, protection. It was almost funny. Almost. At the bottom of the screenshot was the name of the woman who had written it. Brielle Sutton, Travis's girlfriend, a woman I had met exactly 4 times, each one long enough for her to decide I was cold, because I didn't confuse chaos with charisma. 10 minutes later, another message hit my phone. This one from my mother. "We can still avoid ugliness if you make the right decision today." I didn't answer. Instead, I called a business attorney who had handled contract disputes for us before and asked for the fastest possible consult on defamation, workplace disruption, and criminal extortion. Then I asked my IT manager to preserve all incoming texts, emails, forwarded screenshots, and visitor security footage starting immediately. I wasn't panicking anymore. I was documenting. Around noon, Travis texted me directly. "Heard you're being stubborn. Let's talk like adults," as if blackmail were maturity. I told him to meet me at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the office and sent the message from a separate phone, while my real one recorded from my bag. He arrived wearing a smirk and one of those expensive casual jackets men buy when they want to look successful without doing anything successful. He sat down and skipped the small talk. He said the post was ready, more people were willing to confirm the story, and all of this could disappear if I stopped being dramatic and gave family what it deserved. Then he said the part that burned itself into my memory. "You owe us. You always were the one who got out." I asked what exactly I owed him for. For being related to me? For every mess our grandparents trained everyone else to clean up? For the years my parents kept handing him second, third, and fifth chances while treating my boundaries like betrayal? He shrugged and told me Luke wasn't blood, which made him expendable. He said I didn't need a best friend in leadership. I needed someone I could trust. I let him keep talking. Every ugly word made my case cleaner. Before I left, I asked whether he understood he was threatening my business with a fabricated sexual misconduct claim. He smiled and said nobody cares what's true once a story starts moving. That sentence ended up saving me. The next morning was the one people in my office still talk about. At 8:17, my receptionist called my cell and whispered, "Nora, your dad is here, and he just told me he's the new HR director." I was in the garage elevator and actually laughed once because the audacity was so cartoonish it broke my brain for a second. When the doors opened, I saw him through the glass wall near reception, standing with a leather folder under one arm like he'd practiced that pose in a mirror. Beside him was Travis, already wearing a navy polo embroidered with a fake version of our company logo. He had really spent money on a uniform for a job he didn't have. My father told the receptionist she could direct all personnel concerns to him going forward because leadership restructuring was underway. Several employees had paused nearby, not close enough to interfere, but close enough to witness history. I walked straight up to them and asked why they were in my office without permission. My father, calm as a man introducing a merger, said we were going to fix my leadership problem before I embarrassed myself further. Travis gave Luke a look that was half triumph, half schoolyard challenge. Then my father said, in front of my staff, that I was removing Luke from operations effective immediately and appointing Travis in his place. He said it as if a declaration created reality. I asked my receptionist to call building security. My father lowered his voice and warned me not to make this public. I told him he had confused me with someone who still feared scenes more than betrayal. Travis took a step forward, chest out, like he wanted to occupy space he hadn't earned. Luke moved without drama, just enough to stand beside me instead of behind me. That mattered. It always will. My father saw it and snapped that Luke had manipulated me for years, that everyone could see it except me, that a woman in my position needed family around her before strangers ruined her life. I said clearly so the cameras would catch every syllable, "You are trespassing, you are impersonating authority inside a private company, and if either of you contacts my staff again after today, my attorney will treat it as harassment." Something in my tone finally cracked the performance, because my father's face hardened into the look he used when I was 16 and dared to disagree in public. Security arrived. Travis started arguing. My father called me ungrateful. And then my mother appeared in the parking lot outside the front windows, moving fast enough that one heel nearly gave out under her. She must have been waiting in her car for the signal. By then, 2 clients were walking in for a scheduled meeting. My mother saw security, saw the clients, and made the worst decision of her life. She started screaming, not crying first, not pleading, screaming. My daughter is a predator and this company is covering for her. Everyone froze. My client stopped dead on the sidewalk. My receptionist put a hand over her mouth. One of my field inspectors turned all the way around from the copier and just stared. My mother kept going, loud enough for half the block. Ask her what happened in college. Ask her why she protects certain men. Ask her what kind of place this really is. And that was the moment I smiled. Not because it didn't hurt, because I knew they had just detonated their own defense in public, on camera, in front of witnesses, at my place of business, while repeating a lie I now had recorded evidence they had coordinated. My father saw my expression and, for the first time that week, looked uncertain. Security escorted them off the property. The clients came inside slowly, stunned, and one of them asked if we should reschedule. I said no. Give me 5 minutes, and then I'll show you exactly how this company handles hostile interference. I went into the conference room, shut the door, called my attorney, and said the sentence that changed everything. They just went live with the lie. By that afternoon, my legal team had moved faster than I thought possible. We sent formal preservation notices, trespass warnings, and a demand that Betrayal remove the draft post and cease publication of any defamatory statements. But I didn't stop there, because legal defense alone wasn't enough. My parents had counted on shame, on confusion, on the instinct to keep family mess private while it rotted in the walls. So I chose light instead. I called an all-staff meeting and told everyone exactly what had happened, minus none of the ugliness that mattered. I told them a relative was attempting to force a hire by threatening a fabricated accusation tied to my college years. I told them the lie had been repeated on company property by non-employees now banned from the premises. I told them no one at Skytrace would ever be asked to tolerate intimidation because the person causing it shared my DNA. Then I answered every question they had, not defensively, cleanly. One of my project managers asked whether there had ever been a complaint of any kind in my past. I said no. One of our drone pilots asked whether law enforcement was involved. I said my counsel was evaluating extortion and false statement exposure, and that all evidence was being preserved. Luke spoke next, not as my defender but as a leader. He said if anyone felt unsafe, confused, or pressured by outside contact, they were to report it immediately and directly, and no one's job would depend on silence. That meeting stabilized the room. Then we moved outward. I personally called the 2 clients who had witnessed my mother's parking lot performance. I told them I understood how disturbing it had been, that the accusation was false, that it was part of an ongoing family coercion attempt, and that counsel had already begun action. One of them surprised me by laughing softly and saying, "Nora, the guilty ones usually hide. You sound like someone documenting a fire." That helped more than he knew. That night, my attorney and I reviewed everything. The threats from dinner, the text from my mother, the recorded coffee meeting, the lobby footage, the parking lot footage, staff witness statements, and the screenshots of Brielle's prepared post. She looked at me across a legal pad full of notes and said, "They handed you a defamation case, a business interference case, and a possible extortion narrative in less than 48 hours. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt tired in my bones, because winning a case and losing your illusion of family can happen at the same time." The next morning, Brielle published anyway, just not on the page she'd planned. She posted a polished statement on her own account with vague language, insinuations, and the favorite weapon of cowards everywhere. "I'm only sharing this because silence protects abusers." Within minutes, Travis reposted it. My mother liked it. My father sent it to 2 relatives who sent it to 6 more, and by noon I had 3 missed calls from people who had not bothered speaking to me in years, but suddenly felt entitled to ask what kind of woman I really was. That was when I stopped protecting any fragment of their dignity. My attorney filed for emergency injunctive relief on the most explicit published claims, served cease and desist notices, and contacted the platform with documented evidence of coordinated defamation. At the same time, I authorized a formal statement from my company, brief, factual, unemotional. Skytrace Imaging is aware of false statements being circulated by private individuals attempting to interfere with company operations. These statements are categorically untrue. Relevant legal action has been initiated. We remain focused on our clients, our employees, and the integrity of our work. I put my name under it. Not hidden behind PR, not diluted by committee. Mine. By evening, something shifted online. People who knew me from college started messaging voluntarily. Not because I had asked, because lies that stupid have weak bones. A former professor wrote that I had worked in her lab for 2 years and been one of the most disciplined students she ever taught. A woman who had lived on my dorm floor posted that I was the person campus security called when freshmen lock themselves out in winter because I never ignored people in distress. Even an old campus paper editor reached out to say he remembered the rumor Travis's story was loosely stealing from, because the real incident had involved an entirely different person, in an entirely different department, years after I graduated. My family had not even fabricated well. They had plagiarized danger. Day 3 was when the mask came off completely. My father called from a number I didn't know and left a voicemail saying I had one last chance to fix this privately before the family was ruined. Not me. The family. Even then, accountability was something that happened to a group only after it first happened to him. An hour later, Travis sent Luke a message offering to clear things up if Luke stepped aside voluntarily and admitted he had influenced me against my parents. That one made Luke laugh out loud in my office before forwarding it to legal. By afternoon, Brielle deleted 2 comments under her post, but not before our team captured them. In one, someone asked whether she had personal knowledge of the college allegation. She answered, "I know enough." In another, someone asked why nothing had been reported at the time. She replied, "Because powerful families bury things." Powerful. I had to appreciate the irony. I had grown up clipping coupons and stretching gas money, while my parents spent years acting rich at church and reckless in private. The truth began surfacing in layers. My attorney's investigator uncovered that Travis had recently been turned down for 2 jobs after failing background checks tied to financial misconduct complaints. Not convictions, but enough to make employers step back. Brielle, meanwhile, had pitched herself online as an advocate in multiple interpersonal feuds that somehow always ended with donation links. Then came the gift I didn't expect. One of my cousins, the quiet one everyone forgot until holidays required extra folding chairs, emailed me copies of a family group chat. In it, my mother had written that once I got scared enough, I would stop choosing outsiders over blood. My father had replied that public embarrassment was regrettable but necessary. Travis had written, "She'll cave by Friday. She always does when enough people push." He was wrong about many things, but that sentence aged the worst. I gave the screenshots to legal. Then I made one strategic decision that some people still think was cold. I did not post a tearful video. I did not write a wounded essay about betrayal. I did not perform pain for strangers in exchange for belief. I released evidence, edited clips, timestamps, text screenshots, the audio of Travis at the coffee shop saying nobody cares what's true once a story starts moving. The lobby clip showing my father falsely identifying himself as the new HR director. The parking lot video, cropped only to protect bystanders, with my mother shouting the accusation at my office entrance. My attorney approved every second before it went live through formal legal channels and my company statement page. I attached no adjectives, no revenge speech, no dramatic soundtrack, just documentation and one sentence. These individuals attempted to coerce a staffing decision through fabricated misconduct allegations and direct business interference. Their claims are false. The effect was immediate and brutal. Brielle's post disappeared within the hour. Travis called me 14 times from 3 numbers. My father sent a message saying I had humiliated the family in a way that could never be repaired. My mother wrote only, "How could you do this to us?" I stared at that text for a long time because it contained the whole sickness in one line. They had marched a lie to my front door, shouted it to clients, threatened my staff, and still believed exposure was the first true injury in the story. But the public response was not on their side. People were not debating my guilt anymore. They were asking why my parents thought blackmail was parenting. Former clients of Travis began adding stories about unpaid debts and intimidation. Someone in Brielle's circle posted screenshots of her asking whether phrasing something as "my truth" made it safer legally. My aunt, my father's sister, called me in tears to say she had defended them until she heard the audio. Then she told me something that explained more than I wanted explained. My parents were behind on a loan. Travis had been living with them off and on, and they had convinced themselves that getting him a salaried position at my company would stabilize everyone. In other words, they had dressed financial desperation up as moral authority and decided my life was the collateral. By the end of day 4, my attorney filed a wider claim for defamation, tortious interference, and related damages. I also formally notified key clients and insurers with the evidence package before anyone else could distort it. Not one contract was lost. In fact, 2 clients expanded work with us the following month. Crisis has a strange way of clarifying who actually trusts you. On day 5, a black SUV pulled up outside my townhouse just after dark. Then another car. Then a third. I was in the kitchen with takeout containers and Luke sitting at the counter pretending not to monitor my stress when the doorbell started ringing like someone was leaning on it with their whole body. I checked the camera first. My parents, Travis, Brielle, an aunt, one uncle, chaos in winter coats. I opened the front door but left the storm door locked. My mother was already crying hard enough to shake. My father looked 10 years older than he had on Monday. Travis looked furious and scared at the same time, which was new for him. Brielle kept glancing at her phone as if disaster might reverse itself if she refreshed enough. My father began with anger, but it cracked almost immediately into pleading. He said I had to take the videos down, tell people it was a misunderstanding, stop the legal action before more damage was done. My mother said the church board had called. Family friends had stopped answering. My uncle's business had been asked whether he agreed with what happened at my office. Brielle said people were threatening to sue her for posts she had shared in the comments. Travis said employers were seeing the clips when they searched his name. For one ugly second, I saw it exactly as they did. A machine I had set in motion, finally grinding in their direction. Then I remembered my mother screaming predator outside my office door while clients watched through glass. I remembered my father trying to install himself in leadership over a company he had not built. I remembered Travis saying, "Nobody cares what's true once a story starts moving." And I felt nothing that resembled guilt. I stepped onto the porch and closed the inner door behind me. The night was cold enough to sting my lungs. I told them they were not here because they were sorry. They were here because the lie failed. I told my father that if he had come to my office as a parent, we might still have had a private conflict. But he came as a saboteur. I told my mother that once she weaponized a false accusation of predatory behavior in public, there was no family-only version of this left to protect. I told Travis he had spent his whole life mistaking access for entitlement, rescue for respect, and proximity to successful people for proof he belonged where they worked. I told Brielle that activism is not cosplay for vindictive people with Wi-Fi. Nobody interrupted. Maybe because they couldn't. Maybe because, for the first time, I was not defending myself. I was sentencing the moment. My father said he had only been trying to keep the family together. I asked, "Together for whom?" The person always asked. To bleed first is not in a family. She is in a system. My mother whispered that blood should matter. I said it does. That's why betrayal by blood cuts differently. That's why it carries consequences when you use it as a weapon. Then Travis did what weak men do when they realize intimidation has expired. He got mean. He said none of this would have happened if I hadn't always acted superior, if I hadn't chosen a friend over family, if I hadn't made people feel small. I almost thanked him, because there it was, finally, stripped clean. Not concern, not morality, not fear for public safety. Envy, resentment, access. He was not angry that I had done something unforgivable. He was angry that I had built something he could not force his way into. I told them the legal process would continue. I would not take the evidence down. I would not issue a healing statement. I would not restore contact because tears arrived late. My attorney would communicate next steps. My mother started sobbing harder and asked whether I could really do this to my own parents. I said the truth they hated most. You did this to yourselves in my parking lot. Then I went back inside and locked the door. They stayed outside another 20 minutes, arguing with each other loud enough for the camera to catch fragments. My father blaming Travis. Brielle blaming my mother for escalating too early. My mother crying that none of them had understood how far I would go. That part stayed with me. Not because it hurt, because she was right. They had mistaken my restraint for weakness for so long that when I finally defended myself, it looked extreme to them. It wasn't extreme. It was proportionate. In the weeks after, the legal matters moved the way legal matters do. Slower than emotion, faster than denial. Public retractions were issued. Additional posts were removed. Through counsel, statements were corrected. Financial damages were documented. I cut contact with my parents indefinitely. Travis left the state before the season changed. Brielle rebranded her social pages and started talking a lot about growth. None of that interested me. What mattered was quieter. My team stayed. My clients stayed. Luke stayed. The company kept growing, and I learned the lesson my family had tried for years to keep me from learning. Blood is not a lifetime access code to your labor, your reputation, your peace, or your future. Family is not whoever can reach you. Family is whoever can be trusted near what you love without trying to own it. Standing up for yourself is not cruelty. Sometimes it is the most honest thing you will ever do. And if people only call you heartless after your boundaries start costing them something, that does not mean your boundaries are wrong. It means they were benefiting from your silence. So no, I did not save my family that week. I saved myself. And that is why they were clawing at my door, screaming, crying, and begging. Not because they lost me, because they lost control.
To me, the story isn't just about revenge, is about the moment someone finally stops confusing loyalty with surrender. Nora didn't destroy her family. They destroyed trust the second they chose lies, pressure, and public humiliation over honesty. What makes this story powerful is that she didn't win by screaming louder. She won by staying calm, gathering proof, and protecting everything she built. That kind of strength feels deeply satisfying because it's not reckless, it's earned. Do you think Nora did the right thing by exposing her family publicly? Or should she have handled it in private no matter what they did?